Part 130. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1293. This stone mountain is not big but very high. It is the highest mountain in the vicinity, so standing on it, you can see the general situation within a radius of 5 miles. But in the middle of the night, the rumbling sound was especially loud. Even if there was interference from the sound of rain and thunder, they could still imagine the scene of the mud flow rolling down the mountain, crushing the trees and sweeping away the rocks through the sound. The chief guard looked at the surging mudslide below the mountain, and couldn't help wiping off a cold sweat. Fortunately, they were fast enough. If they slowed down a bit, they might be buried in the mudslide. Mu Yangling is also very fortunate, but it is not safe at this time. Now the mountain is surrounded by mudslides like an isolated mountain, and the rain is getting heavier. She is not sure if the mountain can be kept if it goes down like this, even if they are already at the top of the mountain. The most important thing is that they threw away all their luggage, except for the suit of clothes they were wearing. They didn't even have clothes to keep out the cold. They were grown ups, but Beizu and Xiaobeizai were still young. Look around on this mountain to see if there are any caves or the like. If not, find a protruding rock that can shelter from the rain, and avoid the rain first. Mu Yangling instructed. Be careful, don't have any accidents. The chief guard agreed, and quickly dispatched 6 guards to search for it. Fortunately, they were lucky. They found a small cave a little up the mountainside. Maybe it can't be called a cave, but there is a rock stretched out, and a large rock is sunken in, because there is only 1 meter between the rocks. The distance from the head, so no matter how strong the wind and rain are, it will not penetrate. Mu Yangling and the others needed to climb in, but Little Leopard and Beiza cautiously poked in hand. Seeing that the space was warm and dry, and with their mother by their side, they felt much safer. A group of 19 people were crowded in this space, and they could only turn around. Because there was no dry firewood, they could only check the small cave with the help of the weak light of flint and steel. After confirming safety, Mu Yangling sat cross-legged on the ground as if he was relieved, and pulled the 2 children over to take off the tarpaulins on them. No matter how tightly packed they were still a little wet under such a heavy wind and rain. Mu Yangling said solemnly, "We must find some firewood, even if it's not dry. If we don't light a fire, we will definitely get sick if we stay up all night." The chief guard immediately said, "Don't worry, ma'am, although there is little vegetation on this mountain, some firewood can still be found. Bring it back to dry, and then we will find a way to make a fire." Mu Yangling nodded and let them go. "I don't know what happened to your uncle and father." Mu Yangling was full of worries. Qi Xiaoyuan was poisoned, and the court was afraid of chaos, so Qi Heiran couldn't find time to find them. What Mu Yangling didn't know was that the people sent by Fan Zijin and Rong Xian were looking at the mudslide in front of them with tears in their eyes, and shouted, "My lady is inside, my lady is inside." Fan Zijin's people came here first, and Rong Xian's people asked in disbelief, "Are you sure? There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We just asked the people in the village, and they said that they set off early in the morning. Based on their footsteps, they should have reached this section. What's more, you have also seen the wheel marks just now. The wheel marks, it belongs to the palace. Maybe my lady and the others walked fast and happened to be out of the mudslide area." The other guards still refused to accept this fact easily. Fan Zijin's men gritted their teeth and said, "Come on, let's take a detour downstream to see if the concubine and the others have come out. It's a pity that the group didn't get news from the princess down below." The villagers living below said that no one came out on this road in the past 2 days. The villagers said, "It's raining constantly during this period, unless the sky is falling, who would hurry? Isn't the poisoning of the emperor a big event where the sky is falling?" But this is not the time to worry about this. The faces of the 2 teams were all green and white, and asked, "Are you sure no one came out of this road yesterday and today?" The villagers nodded affirmatively. It's over, Niang Niang and the others must still be inside. Maybe they hid in the mountains, why don't you go in and look for them after the rain stops? Send someone to deliver a letter to the capital first. This time they no longer only use fast horses, but carrier pigeons. After all, people are not as fast as carrier pigeons. Fan Zijian and Rong Xian received the news that day, their faces turned pale, Fan Zijian almost fainted, and his heart sank. The annoying people I grew up with are gone like this? Fan Zijian shook his lips, and said in a trembling voice, go tell Heiran and Xiao Xiang. Rong Xian grabbed him, and said in a deep voice, Haoran has just finished changing his blood, and the poison is only half cured, so he can't be stimulated at this time. Fan Zijian shook his head with red eyes, you don't know him. If you don't tell him, he will hate us to death, and his life will never be easy. He has always been more and more courageous. Don't worry, as long as he doesn't see Aling dead body, he will surely recover immediately. Fan Zijian murmured, we must tell him about this. That's your wishful thinking, Rong Xian pulled him back and said, the emperor's situation is deteriorating now, and Heiran can't do anything, otherwise, who will Daki rely on to support him? Everyone is sad when Aling passed away, but he is still young, and time can take away everything. No, Fan Zijian whispered hoarsely, Aling is more important than his life. If he didn't try hard when he knew that Aling was missing, his life would be worse than death in the future. Brother Rong, I can't make him suffer so much. Rong Xian opened his mouth, and Fan Zijian tore off his hand, and hurried to Cunning Palace. Qi Heiran is still lying on the same bed with Qi Ziyuan, but his condition is better than Qi Ziyuan's. Yuan Hui changed their blood, and Qi Heiran immediately became poisoned, but his inner strength was deep and his body was excellent. At the moment when the poisonous blood entered, he subconsciously used his inner strength to protect his heart and internal organs. After the blood exchange, he drank the detoxification soup in time. Even if his body was uncomfortable, the poison was half relieved at this time. But Qi Xiu is far different. His body is not very good. It took more than 10 years of recuperation to reach the level of a normal person. It is not difficult to pay attention to health preservation and live a long life, but once the poison in his body is stimulated, the foundation he has laid before collapses instantly. In addition, the poison had been sealed in his body for 4 days, which caused great damage to his body. Even if the fusion degree was good after replacing Qi Heiran's blood, the poisonous blood was still eroding his body. However, Yuan Hui's medicine was a bit harsh, and Qi Ziyuan's already dilapidated body couldn't bear it, so he vomited blood one after another, and his pulse weakened for a while. Yuan Hui used the precious Tibetan medicine in the palace but failed to turn the situation around. Now she can only hang herself with ginseng. Qi Heiran could only detoxify while staying with his eldest brother, staring at Yuan Hui and the imperial physicians. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1294. Seeing Fan Zijian's pale face, Qi Heiran immediately asked with a headache, what happened again? Fan Zijian twitched his lips and said in a low voice, a mudslide occurred in Nan County, and Ling and the others disappeared. Qi Heiran was taken aback for a moment, and then his expression changed drastically. Nangxian County is in the southwest of Shaoxing Prefecture, and it is only a day and a half away from the capital, but that is when the weather is good. Even if there are no accidents in this kind of weather, it will take 3 days to walk. Counting the time he left, they just arrived there based on Aling's footsteps. She took 2 children with her, and it was raining, so it was impossible for her to walk too fast. But something happened in the capital, and the eldest brother's life and death were uncertain, so it was impossible for her not to rush back. Qi Heiran turned his head in a daze to look at the heavy rain outside. It was just before dawn, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but the outside was drowsy, as if it was already night. Missing in the cold weather, Chi Heiran only felt a pain in his heart, and couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood. Hua Yuan was in a hurry, rushed up to support him, and shouted in his ear, my lord, don't get excited, otherwise the poisonous blood will enter the blood." Fan Zijian grabbed him, stared into his eyes and said, "If you fall down, no one will go to look for Aling." Chi Heiran subconsciously mobilized the internal force that had just stagnated to force the poison back, but he couldn't help but vomited another mouthful of blood. Fan Zijian hugged him and cried, "Not for Daki, but for Aling, Beizu and Xiao Beizai, you have to hold on." Chi Heiran calmed down quickly, and asked in a deep voice, "Since you have received her news, you should know the specific situation. Tell me, how are they doing?" Fan Zijian shook his head, "My people couldn't find them. The road they passed was submerged in mudslides, and the villagers downstream didn't see anyone coming out of that road." Seeing that Chi Heiran's eyes were dark, Fan Zijian immediately comforted him, "But there are many mountains on that road, maybe she found a place with high mountains and escaped." Chi Heiran looked at the elder brother who was still unconscious on the other side, and said with difficulty, "If I go to find Aling?" Fan Zijian immediately said, "Big cousin, I will take care of you here, and the government also has me and brother wrong, so you can just rest assured. Even if you are smashed to pieces, I will keep Daki and wait for you to come back." Chi Heiran shook his lips, shook his hand, and didn't ask him why he sent someone to look for Aling. Chi Heiran lifted the quilt and was about to get out of bed. Seeing that people were about to leave the hall, Yuan Hui, who had been counting with his fingers, said, "Aren't you going to ask me if she is still alive?" Chi Heiran froze, turned around and stared at him with red eyes. Yuan Hui looked directly at him and smiled, "Congratulations, she's still alive," and, Yuan Hui looked at the sky outside, said, "It's probably going to clear up." Chi Heiran's eyes burst into light, and he turned around to rush out, but Yuan Hui continued, "The Emperor's vitality is also in her." Yuan Hui turned over the medical book that Hua Yuan Zhang found the last page, and tore off the paper on it. Handed over to him, and said, "This is a rock lotus, a lotus flower that grows on rocks. It is warm in nature and detoxifies. The Emperor's body cannot withstand the overpowering antidote. If you can find the rock lotus, the Emperor's crisis will be solved. But the prince's speed is better, the Emperor's time is running out." Hearing this, Chi Heiran immediately stepped forward to write down the pictures and descriptions above, then folded them up and wrapped them in oilcloth, and strode out. Fan Zijian regretted it immediately, and said, "Since Aling is fine, why don't you stay and rest? We will send someone to bring them back, your poison is not clean yet." "No, I'm not at ease, not to mention that this matter involves the Emperor's brother." Fan Zijian wanted to curl his lips, but seeing that Chi Heiran's lips were still black, he could only suppress his dissatisfaction, and tried his best to persuade gently, "Then you also think about your physical condition. If Aling sees that you are poisoned and runs around, how sad it must be." "It's okay, I'll comfort her." Chi Heiran regained his vitality after knowing that Aling was not dead, and his tongue was not ordinary. Chi Heiran made up his mind, immediately put on his raincoat and took a dozen guards with him, and headed to Nan County. Fan Zijian could only stare at the man walking away, and then couldn't help but slap himself. If he knew that the man was fine, why did he bother to tell him? It is simply superfluous. Rongxian said coolly behind him, "Didn't you cry in front of me just now and say that you can't lie to him? Why do you regret it now?" Fan Zijian turned around and left. Standing alone under the eaves, Rongxian looked at the group of people going away, and prayed in his heart, hoping that Chi Heiran and the others would move faster, so that the Emperor would be safe in the end. Chi Heiran was not too worried about Mu Yangling at this time, but was very worried about Chi Ziyuan, for fear that he would not be able to make it in time, so even though it was raining heavily, he still hurried on his way. However, the situation of Mu Yangling, who was still hiding in the small cave, was not as good as they had imagined. They found a lot of wet firewood and damp grass, and at this time the benefits of martial arts came to the fore. Being selected by Chi Heiran to personally protect Mu Yangling and the two children, their kung fu is naturally very good, and their internal strength is also among the best. Internal strength can not only keep them warm in winter and cool in summer, but also keep them in good shape, and it can also dry clothes, and naturally, it can also dry firewood and withered grass. And it's sustainable energy. Of course, she will not ask people to dry all the firewood. As long as a fire can be lit, other wet firewood is not a problem at all, so the problem of keeping warm is solved. But they didn't eat it. When they fled for their lives, they lost everything, including food, of course. Except for a few pieces of snacks in the pockets of the two children, they had nothing to eat, and they couldn't hunt even under the heavy rain, not to mention that there were very few prey on this rocky mountain with sparse vegetation. Going through mudslides to hunt on other mountains, let alone safety issues, the key is that they don't have that ability yet. Their kung fu is powerful, but not to that extent. So, everyone was hungry. Bezu and the little leopard began to cry and feel hungry after eating the only snacks they had. Mu Yangling felt very distressed, and began to take people to look for food when the rain stopped or lightened. She just went to dig the hole and found 2 hedgehogs and several fat mountain mice. Although the problem of hunger has not been solved, at least the food and clothing of the 2 children have been solved. What really frightened her was the thunderstorm and lightning outside. Since noon, the thunder and lightning outside seemed to be aiming at this place, crackling and crackling. Not only Mu Yangling, but also the people in the small cave were staring outside nervously, for fear that a thunder would blow their shelter. The cave was split. Mu Yangling looked at the sky outside and said, "If you don't know, you might think that some great power is going through the catastrophe and becoming a fairy." Li Chun said hello with his head full, "Your Majesty, what's so great?" "The great power of cultivating immortals. The appearance of the sky is about to fall from the outside. It is too much like the scene of crossing the catastrophe described in the novels of ghosts, but who would have thought that it would be spring at this time?" Mu Yangling was worried, fearing that the people of Daki would suffer again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1295. The thunderstorm and lightning seemed to aim at this mountain and smash down desperately. All the guards raised their hearts and thought to themselves, "This day is not going to collapse, right?" But Mu Yangling thought, "Is there something on this mountain that attracts lightning? Why did you smash it all over this mountain?" Everyone was worried that a flash of lightning would destroy the cave they lived in, so they kept looking outside helplessly. Li Shun and the 2 timid mothers didn't dare to watch. They covered their ears and huddled together, as if they were safe if they didn't listen or watch. Bezu and Little Leopard were also huddled in their mother's arms in fear at first, perhaps because they got used to it for too long, or maybe because they were still young and fearless. The 2 children quickly raised their eyes and looked outside. At first, he hid in his mother's arms after just one look, and then hid after another look. Later, the 2 of them watched for a long time, and the little leopard pointed to a lightning bolt and said, "Look, Siang noodles." Bezu retorted, "It's obviously like a silver hairpin." The 2 children gradually became less afraid, and began to cuddle up to their mother to discuss the thunder and lightning outside, and they would be amazed when they saw the strange shape. The little leopard also asked, "Mother, are the gods living in the sky fighting? Like our Daki fights like Dajin?" This idea was immediately recognized by most people. A young guard leaned over and whispered, "The 4th young master is really right. Maybe the gods in the sky are really fighting, otherwise I haven't seen him in 20 years. With such a strange weather, such a heavy rain in spring, and such heavy thunder and lightning, maybe it is the thunder and lightning mother who are fighting. The guards nodded. The chief guard twitched his eyes and said, "You are only 19 this year, where did you get 20 years? The little guard immediately raised his chest and said, "I'm 21 years old." Mu Yangling couldn't help laughing out loud. She thought for a while and said, "I don't know why there is such a heavy thunderstorm at this time, but I don't think it's the gods in the sky who are fighting. You can think about it and verify it yourself in the future. Maybe we can discover the mystery of it." Mu Yangling said again, "Whether it's thunder or lightning, I think we can create it as long as we understand the principles inside." The little guard said in a daze, "Why do we make thunder and lightning? If we want to make it, we also make rain. Isn't there often an altar in the scriptures to pray for rain? Since we can make thunder, can we also make rain?" The chief guard patted him on the head and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Praying for rain is the work of the national teacher." Mu Yangling said in a daze, "Yes, there is me in this world, and there is also the national teacher. Maybe there are gods in the sky. Could it be that the formation of this rain is also different?" The guards were confused. They understood every word the princess said, but they couldn't understand it together. But Mu Yangling was startled. In her previous life, she didn't believe in any fantasy. The reason why fairy tales are myths is because they are imagined by people and do not exist. But she died and was reincarnated, and she still obviously retained the memory of her previous life. Moreover, Yuan Hui is not a magic stick, at least he can accurately predict many unknown things. Since he can calculate the way of heaven, does it mean that there is such a mysterious thing as the way of heaven in this world? Are there really gods on that day? If everything is an illusion, and Yuan Hui is indeed a magic stick, what about her? Was her past life fake, or is she fake now? Is she the Mu Yangling of the previous life, or the current Mu Yangling? Where is it a dream? Mu Yangling pinched himself, and it was painful, so it must not be a dream now, not to mention, how could there be such a clear daily dream? Those love and hate, sorrow and joy are so clear. But was the past life a dream of his own? Mu Yangling shook her head slightly. When her father forced her to go to the military academy, she could still clearly feel her resistance and grief until now. The feeling of sudden cardiac arrest before she died was still in her heart, and that was absolutely impossible. Dream. Little Leopard and Beza saw their mother staring blankly, and felt that she was getting farther and farther away from them. The two children panicked, hugged her, and cried, "Mother, mother, what's wrong with you?" Mu Yangling broke away from the mysterious feeling, hugged the two children, and said to the guards who were looking at her worriedly, "I'm fine, I just got obsessed with things just now, it's my fault, I'm too cranky gone." Mu Yangling touched the cheeks of the two children, met their round eyes, and murmured in a low voice, "You are the children born in October of my pregnancy, how could it be fake? All of this is true, both sides are true." No one heard her whisper, even if the chief guard pricked up his ears, they couldn't hear clearly, but they all knew that the princess was a little abnormal, and when they thought about the abnormal weather outside, everyone felt a little uneasy, and they only hoped that the weather would clear up soon. So leave this place and find a doctor to check the princess' body. As soon as Mu Yangling figured it out, he felt relaxed. And the thunder and lightning outside gradually stopped as if they were tired, and the rain in the sky gradually stopped. Everyone lay down at the entrance of the cave and looked out, and saw a beautiful scene that they would never forget in their lifetime. The dark clouds in the sky spread out as quickly as if they were pushed away by someone's hand. The sun that had already set in the west suddenly appeared, and the rosy clouds filled the entire sky in an instant, and the originally dark world suddenly became bright and red. Everyone opened their mouths and looked up at the scene in the sky. Mu Yangling led the twins out of the small cave, looked up at the colorful clouds in the sky, and said, "The sky is clear now, right?" Li Chun clasped his hands together and said, maybe someone is really going through the catastrophe and becoming a fairy. Otherwise, how could the dark clouds dissipate so quickly? These clouds are too beautiful. The guards nodded stupidly, it was so beautiful. At this moment, no one spoke anymore, and everyone looked up to admire the beautiful scene, wanting to keep them in their hearts forever. And there are quite a few people who have the same idea as them. Anyone who can see this strange scene walks out of the house one after another, kneeling down and praying for the immortals to bless them. It was even worse in the capital city. The common people knelt all over the street, even in the homes of the ministers. The old matriarch and wives also walked out of the house and looked up at the sky, muttering, "Is this day going to get better?" The ministers were not interested in appreciating such strange sights. The emperor still hadn't appeared, and the palace was already searching for strange medicines. Obviously, the emperor's poison was not optimistic, and King An ordered the palace gates to be sealed off, and the princes were not allowed to enter or leave. The court is obviously guarding against the princes fighting for power at this time. Although the dark clouds in the sky dispersed, the dark clouds in the Daki court hall became heavier and heavier. And there was a group of people who didn't look at the clouds in the sky, so naturally they didn't care that the dark clouds in Daki Chaotang were on their way wholeheartedly. Chi Heiran only felt that God was helping him, knowing that he had to hurry, so the rain stopped. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1296. When the weather cleared, they were finally able to come out of the small cave. The water on the mountain continued to flow down, and the mudslides had gradually stopped. The original road was piled up with trees, stones, and mud, and it was impossible to walk on it. Mu Yangling looked at the road and sighed, and said, "It's getting late, let's find a way to hunt some prey, and we'll find a way to get out of the mountains tomorrow." The guards responded and tried their best to run to the nearby mountain to hunt for prey. After all, the mountain here is full of rocks. It was luck to touch the mountain rat early this morning. They were so hungry that they brought back a few rabbits and a silly roe deer before it was completely dark. The chief guard said cheerfully, "This roe deer broke its leg by the mountain current and got stuck on the mountainside. We saw it as soon as we passed by, and we brought it back when we saw that it was still alive." Just after the rain stopped, only a few animals came out to bask in the sun or look for food, and most of them hid, so they took a lot of time to catch a few rabbits. But there are so many of them and a few rabbits are not enough to fit between their teeth, let alone they have been hungry for 2 days. The stone mountain cannot have a water source, but after a heavy rain just now, the sunken stones are filled with water, and the water keeps flowing down the mountain, because there is less mud and more stones here, and the water flowing to the middle of the mountain is very clear. Although Mu Yangling knew that there were many lives in the seemingly clear water that they could not see with the naked eye, but what hygiene was there if people were starving to death? She cleans up her prey with the water without any psychological barriers. Mu Yangling was like this, not to mention the guards who marched and fought with Chi Heiran. They happily roasted their prey with a simple peeling. They lost all the ingredients they put in their luggage. They didn't even have the most basic salt, but they were so hungry that they ate everything. Even Beizu and the little leopard ate a piece of roe deer meat. Seeing that their mouths were full of greasy food, Mu Yangling wiped their mouths and said, "Don't eat too much, you are still young, we will eat some light porridge tomorrow after we go out." Little leopard and Beizu turned around holding the meat, and continued to gnaw with their heads down. Mu Yangling was a little helpless, knowing that they were extremely hungry. He felt sorry for them, and could only watch them not let them eat. After a night's rest, everyone's spirits were almost recovered, and they began to discuss ways to leave. This mountain was surrounded by mudslides, and the original road had been destroyed long ago. It was almost impossible for them to get out. The chief guard said, "Unless we wait until the sun dries the soil, we won't be able to go out at all." The chief guard paused and then said, "But if we are alone, we can use the trees and stones in the mud flow to borrow strength. As long as there is a place to rest halfway, then you can leave. In the end, it still depends on light work, but they can take children with them, but it is impossible to bring adults. Although the mud flow has stopped, it is still dangerous. Once a person falls, he will be stuck in the mud and it is difficult to get up again. Mu Yangling obviously knew this too, frowned and said, "Why don't you go out and find someone first, and then come back to save us?" The chief guard felt that this method was good, and immediately selected 3 people with good lightness skills to report. At this time, Chi Heiran, who had been on the road all night, happened to meet Fan Zijian and Rongxian's people. He thought that the other party had found Aling, so although he was tired, he was happy. As soon as the carriage used by the princess and the others was dug out from the mudslide, the guards, who were panicking, met the prince's smiling face. Guards. Although they belong to Prince An and Mr. Zhou, they also know that the prince has a deep affection for the concubine. Now that the concubine is in danger, how can the prince still laugh? There must be something wrong with the way they turned around. Chi Heiran asked with a smile on his face, "Where are the princess and the 4th young master, the little princess?" The faces of the guards froze immediately, and they immediately understood that someone must have passed false news to the prince, thinking that they had saved the princess and the little masters. "Who is that person? Stand up, we will definitely not kill you, we will make your life worse than death." Because they are living worse than death now? The guards murmured. Chi Heiran gradually realized something was wrong, put away his smile and asked again, "Where is the princess and the 4th young master, the little princess?" The guards hurriedly knelt down to plead guilty. "Go back to the lord, we didn't find the empress and the 2 young masters," the guards stammered. We found the carriage used by the palace." A group of people stepped aside carefully, pointed to the washed out logs on the ground and said, "This is what the little ones just dug out from the mud flow." Chi Heiran sneered with a sullen face, "The mudslide is coming soon, how stupid do you think the princess is to continue riding in the carriage? They must not be in the carriage." The guards carefully observed the prince's expression, not knowing if he was comforting himself or if he really thought so. But Chi Heiran had no expression on his face, and no one could see anything. Chi Heiran looked at the road and said, "Since the princess hasn't come out, she must be on a mountain inside, ready to eat and fresh water, we will go in and find someone later." The guards blocked the way vainly. "My lord, although the mudslide has stopped, there are still many dangers inside." "Then you go in and find someone." The guards opened their mouths. If they had the ability, they wouldn't be digging the carriage here. Chi Heiran sneered, turned around and left with a dozen guards behind him. Being able to protect Chi Heiran, who was poisoned by his side, is not weak, so the guards who followed him brought dry food and water and went in, using the method mentioned by the chief guard and Mu Yangling. They don't have extra time to think about ways to get in safely. The guards looked at Chi Heiran, who jumped at the front with concern, and started to lead him 2 by 2. Chi Heiran did not refuse their help. He ran out before the poison was cleared. At this time he used his internal force again, and the poison circulated faster. Even if he took medicine to suppress it, he was afraid that he would not be able to find Aling. So he does not refuse help from others. Since Yuan Hui said that Aling is fine, then Aling must be safe now. Chi Heiran kept insisting with this belief, so he met 4 guards sent by the chief guard on the way. Knowing that Mu Yangling and the 2 children were safe, Chi Heiran's eyes turned red. So the 2 teams were divided into 2 again, and the 2 led Chi Heiran and the others to find Mu Yangling and the others, and Chi Heiran sent out 2 guards to find someone to find a way to rescue them. On a sunny day after the thunderstorm, Mu Yangling took the children to play on the mountain. He couldn't just sit on the ground and wait. Although the mountain was bare, there were many beautiful stones. The 2 children were accompanied by their mother, and the experience of the past 2 days was not so scary, so when Chi Heiran flew up anxiously, what he saw was Mu Yangling holding a stone with the twins and laughing. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1297. Chi-Heiran's tense heartstrings loosened at once. He walked forward slowly. Bezu was the first to find his father, pointing at his mother's back and shouting, "Daddy!" Mu Yangling immediately turned her head and saw Chi-Heiran pursing her lips and smiling at her. Her heart immediately calmed down, and she couldn't help pursing her lips into a smile. Little Leopard and Bezu saw that their father and mother only looked at and smiled at each other, and ignored them at all, and suddenly became unhappy, and shouted, "Father, Mother, there are us, you have forgotten us again." Bezu ran towards her father while talking. The mountain is full of uneven stones. Bezu tripped over the stone after only jumping twice, and fell face down. Chi-Heiran hurriedly rushed up and hugged him in his arms. He lightly spanked her twice, and taught her a lesson: walking depends on the road. This is a mountain. How dare you run like this? What if you fall off the cliff? This mountain is not low, and it is full of stones. If people roll down, their heads will be bloodied. Mu Yangling also grabbed the little leopard who was about to run, and ran to Chi-Heiran's side lightly, touched his lips with concern, and said, "Did you catch a cold? Why are your lips black?" Chi-Heiran didn't dare to talk about his blood poisoning. He just nodded and said, "It rained on the road." Mu Yangling reached out to touch his clothes. It was cold but not wet. Chi-Heiran smiled naively and said, "I changed the wet clothes on the way." Mu Yangling's eyes turned red, and he looked at the blue eyes in front of his eyes. "I'm afraid that the night wind dried the clothes after traveling all night." "Look, your eyes are blue, and you can tell that you haven't slept." Chi-Heiran gave her a naive smile. The guards behind him opened their mouths, and Chi-Heiran, who was sideways, gave him a warning glance, and immediately dared not tell his true situation. Chi-Heiran was worried about Mu Yangling, looked left and right and asked, "Did you hide here for those 2 days?" "No, we hid in a small cave on the mountainside, because we were bored waiting, and the weather was fine, so I took the children up to see the scenery." Chi-Heiran grabbed her hand and asked, "You lost all your luggage, did you catch the cold, did you get hungry?" Seeing that the prince had completely forgotten about his poisoning and the emperor in the palace, the guards immediately coughed lightly and interjected in a low voice, "My lord, we still have to go find Yanlian." "Crag lotus? What rock lotus?" Chi-Heiran glanced at them, and said, "It's the antidote for elder brother, Yuan Hui said you know about it." Mu Yangling immediately shook his head and said, "I know about lotus, but I've never heard of rock lotus. Could it be possible that lotus can grow on rocks?" Chi-Heiran immediately took out the paper wrapped in oiled paper from his arms, unfolded it and said, "Here, it looks like this. It is said that it grows in the crevices of rocks. Elder brother is in poor health now, and he can't use the medicine of tiger and wolf. Rock lotus is warm in nature and is good for detoxification, and it is said that it is harder to find than century-old ginseng." Mu Yangling opened it and said, "I've heard of snow lotus, and it's said that it's also very good." Mu Yangling looked at the painting on the paper and said after a while, "It doesn't look like a lotus at all." Chi-Heiran nodded, "But it's called this, you just say if you've seen it before." "It's true that I haven't seen it before today, but I have seen it today." Mu Yangling led him to the cliff on the west side, pointed down and said, "Look, don't they look alike?" Chi-Heiran lowered his head to look, and at a distance of 10 feet away from him, a flower plant curved and grew out from between two rocks, facing the sun and blooming in full bloom. The pink flower trembled in the wind, extremely delicate and beautiful. Mu Yangling coughed lightly and said, "I think it looks like a single-petaled sunflower. I told the children just now that it is tough. So many days of thunderstorms failed to knock it down. Once the sun comes out it's on." Chi-Heiran couldn't believe that this flower came so easily, and asked in a murmur, "When did this flower bloom? It should have been just now. It was only half open when we came up in the morning." Chi-Heiran immediately ordered, "Hurry up and pick it." Immediately, Two guards took the rope to hang down to pick the flowers. They read the paper and confirmed each other's picking methods before hanging down and carefully cutting the flowers. Mu Yangling saw that they were holding the flower like a treasure, and asked complicatedly, "Can this really save the emperor?" Yuan Hui and Hua Yuan are saying yes. Mu Yangling's heart became more complicated. It turns out that Yuan Hui is really not a magic stick. Qi Heiran twitched the corner of his mouth, and asked someone to divide the rock lotus into 4, put them in 4 boxes and mix them with the other 2 boxes, and then handed them over to 6 teams, 4 people in each team, and said, "You divide the lotus immediately. Go back to Beijing on the 6th route, remember your route. If you encounter an ambush on the way, you are allowed to change your route, and you must send your things back to the palace within 2 days." The 24 selected immediately knelt down and should be. Qi Heiran only brought 18 people, so he had to draw 6 people from the original bodyguards, plus the 4 people who left before. There were only 9 people left to protect them. A guard who followed Qi Heiran couldn't help but pull the chief guard aside before leaving, and said in a low voice, "My lord and the sage just finished exchanging blood, not only weak but also poisoned. He doesn't have enough detoxification pills. You have to be careful, don't let him show off in front of the princess." The chief guard was stunned, and couldn't help but turn to look at the prince, only to find that the blackness on the prince's lips hadn't disappeared until now, and it didn't seem to be caused by the cold at all. The prince's internal energy is profound, many times stronger than him. He will not catch cold even if he uses his internal energy to protect his body in the rain, let alone the prince. The chief guard got anxious and followed Qi Heiran again and again. Qi Heiran naturally also saw their private communication, couldn't help but glared at the guard, then looked at the guard with a warning and said, "You have to keep your mouth tight when you follow this king." Mu Yangling asked behind him, "Why?" Qi Heiran was taken aback, and turned back to look at her in panic. Mu Yangling originally asked casually, but now seeing his reaction like this, he immediately asked with concern, "Why, you have something to hide from me?" Qi Heiran shook his head repeatedly. Mu Yangling glanced at his lips and face, and snorted, "It's better not to, otherwise, hum." Qi Heiran followed her to the cave like a little daughter-in-law, and promised, "I never hide anything from you. Then tell me about the poisoning and detoxification of the emperor's brother." Cold sweat rolled down Qi Heiran's forehead. When Beizu and Xiaobeizai saw it, they immediately clapped their hands and shouted, "Daddy is guilty, Daddy must have done something bad." Seeing that the 2 children were so cheating, Qi Heiran couldn't help but glared at them. The 2 children were not afraid at all. They hid behind Mu Yangling and stuck out their tongues at him, saying, "Who made Daddy break out in a cold sweat? We all know that we are guilty at such a young age." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1298. Qi Heiran drove the 2 mischievous children out and let Li Shun take them away, then turned around to coax Mu Yangling. Mu Yangling held him down and searched him inside and out, and found a bottle of medicine from his inner pocket. Mu Yangling opened it and asked, "What kind of medicine is this?" Qi Heiran opened his mouth to lie, but Mu Yangling immediately said, "I can smell ordinary medicines, so you have to think about it before you speak." Qi Heiran opened his mouth, but the lie couldn't come out no matter what. Mu Yangling pressed on him and hummed, "It's the first time I've seen you with medicine other than golden sore medicine." Qi Heiran stared at her with round eyes, making up his mind not to speak. Mu Yangling stared at his lips and asked, "Why are your lips still black?" Qi Heiran looked at her as innocently as possible. Mu Yangling grabbed his hand, bared his teeth and said, "Although I don't learn kung fu very well, my internal energy is not bad after 20 years. If you don't tell me, Do you believe that I will inject internal energy into your body? Chi Heiran didn't expect that she would use this trick. Indeed, if he was cold and didn't use his internal energy to dispel the cold, it can only be said that there was a problem with his internal energy. Otherwise, he was poisoned, but if he was poisoned, any external internal force would break into his body, which would definitely break the balance in his body and make him feel even more uncomfortable. Chi Heiran lowered his head and told the truth, and whispered, I feel that the toxins in my body are out of balance, and I can no longer use my internal strength, so I can't get out for the time being. Since I'm trapped here, I can't worry you day and night. Fortunately, I still have antidote pills on me. Mu Yangling fell off him and said angrily, can pills compare to soup? The efficacy of the pill was nearly a quarter less than that of the decoction, not to mention that the pill on his body was being refined in a hurry. Mu Yangling felt his pulse, and asked after a long time, is it true that you can't use your internal strength? Chi Heiran nodded affirmatively. If he could use the elder brother's medicine, he would personally lead a team back. Why bother to hand it all over to the guards? His heart is always worried about peace. Mu Yangling looked at him worriedly. Not to mention the lack of medicine, there is not even enough daily necessities here. How can he recuperate well by staying here? Mu Yangling looked at the guards outside, and gradually had a plan in his mind. As a result, the guards on the mountain were sent out one after another, not only carrying back a lot of firewood, but also found a clean water source on a nearby mountain. And the guards who went out to find a way to rescue them also came with a group of people and a pile of supplies. They tied things with ropes, and the two of them rushed over with jumping. Because of insufficient understanding, even if each group only they carried 20 to 30 kilograms of things, and they dropped them several times, and their clothes were dirty. There are pots and rice, as well as quilts and clothes. These things are prepared for Li Shun and the others. The guards expressed that they are willing to leave a few people to protect these servants who do not know martial arts, so that the prince and princess can take the little ones with them. The masters left first, and they took the people out after the soil on the ground was dry. But the chief guard said to them calmly, the prince is poisoned, he can't use his internal strength for the time being. So unless you can carry the prince out, everyone has to stay. The guards turned their heads in a daze to look at the prince who was fawning over the concubine, and they all thought of the elegant posture and fast movement of the prince when he flew up the mountain today. As expected of a prince, he dared to use his internal strength like this even after being poisoned. So the things they brought were cheaper for Chi Heiran's family, and in order to make life easier, the guards were sent out to buy things in turn. However, within 2 days, the small cave on the mountain was not only refurbished, but the guards also built a simple thatched hut out of wood with hay and quilts in the slightly flat place next to it. Peace of mind took root. The small cave became their family's house, with oil lamps on the walls, and 3 spaces separated by curtains. The front room was used as the main room, and the back 2 rooms were the bedrooms of the couple and their 2 children. Hay was spread underneath, and a thick quilt was spread above. Even if the ground was icy rocks, it would not be cold to sleep at night. Mu Yangling took out the prescription given by Yuan Hui from Chi Heiran, and asked the guards to find a prescription to grab the medicine. He supervised Chi Heiran to take it every day. After 2 days, the blackness on his lips disappeared and his face looked better. Mu Yangling couldn't help but heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that he ran out every morning to face the morning sun and meditate, he felt that although he was forced to be trapped here, there was nothing wrong with it. At this time, after 2 days of running around, 3 groups of people from the 6 groups responsible for escorting Yanli finally rushed back to the capital, and the other 3 groups were missing. Of the 3 boxes I brought back, 2 of them contained rock lotus. The imperial physicians who had been locked up in the harem almost wept with joy, and immediately prepared and brewed it according to Yuan Hui and Hua Yuanzhen's instructions, and quickly served it to the emperor. An hour after taking the medicine, the imperial physicians lined up to take the emperor's pulse, and when they felt the pulse that was originally chaotic and weak became weak and orderly, the imperial physicians almost cried out. Everyone looked at the remaining medicine excitedly, lowered their voices and said, although the rock lotus in these 2 boxes is enough, we should prepare more just in case. Xiao Bao immediately decided to send someone to meet the 3 groups of guards. Xiao Xiong snorted coldly and said, it's just a matter of time to find out who caused the accident to Uncle Huang. Among the 3 groups of guards, one group was lucky and was not intercepted by anyone. They were also the first to bring back Yanlian, while the other 2 groups were blocked on the road, but they were clever, and the opponent sent not many people, so get rid of each other quickly. But the other 3 groups walked closer than them, but there was no movement for a long time. Obviously, they were surrounded more severely. Qi Xiaoyuan's condition was under control, not only Xiaobao and Xiao Xiong, but also Fan Zijin and Rong Xian began to focus on investigating the mastermind behind the scenes. It was also because they were too busy that they forgot about Qi Heiran and his wife for a while. When Qi Xiaoyuan opened his eyes, the first thing he asked was, where are Heiran and Aling? Are they all right? Li Jinghua and Xiaobao were taken aback for a moment, and Fan Zijin and Rong Xian were also taken aback, thinking inwardly, what the hell, they forgot about this couple. The little bear who was still behind them silently replied, Uncle Huang, my father and mother are fine. Little Xiong knows that Uncle Huang has been sane, so he naturally knows the situation of his parents better. After all, they were his parents, and his 2 younger siblings lived on the mountain, so naturally he had to keep an eye on the correspondence. Qi Xiaoyuan looked at Xiao Xiong with gentle eyes, waved at him, and when he reached him, he grabbed him and asked, is the poison on your father clear? No, but it's almost done, Xiao Xiong said, Daddy has been taking the medicine according to the prescription of the national teacher, and the poison is almost gone. Qi Xiaoyuan heaved a sigh of relief, and murmured, Uncle Huang has caused him trouble. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1299. As soon as Qi Xiaoyuan woke up, he forced himself to appear in the court hall with his sick body. The courtiers who were originally undercurrents suppressed their thoughts after seeing the emaciated but energetic emperor. Qi Xiaoyuan looked at the courtiers bowing their heads respectfully, and said in a deep voice, I have not recovered from my illness. From now on, the crown prince will be the prime minister in government affairs, and the left minister will be assisted by the minister of the household department. Unresolved matters will be reported to me by the prince. Qi Xiaoyuan took a breath, and continued, all the affairs of the imperial city and the palace are under the command of King An, just like the holy will, and you must respectfully abide by it and not violate it. The heads of the officials were lowered. Fan Zijin forbade the princes to enter and leave the palace, and the information transmitted internally and externally was strictly controlled. The entire palace was under his control. Of course, the officials were dissatisfied, and he was not a clan, and he is not the commander of the imperial army, so he shouldn't be involved in the affairs of the palace. But both the queen and Prince Rong believed in him, and the officials could only provoke the clan to make trouble, and impeach him for arbitrariness. Who knew that the emperor would support him when he came out? What really terrified the officials was that the emperor agreed with Prince Rong's arrangement, and everyone looked at Yan Du cryptically. So the right minister not only offended Prince Rong, but also lost the trust of the emperor? Regardless of what everyone thought, Qi Xiaoyuan held the prince's hand and retreated. The courtiers watched the crown prince supporting the emperor drifting away. From then on, they became more respectful to the crown prince, and put away their extra thoughts for the time being. Now that the emperor is detoxified, there is no need to be so anxious even if he wants to fight. The emperor is in the prime of his life, and the prince is getting older. At this time, the emperor, who was judged by the courtiers to be young and vigorous, was spitting out a mouthful of blood, and Xiaobao was anxious to announce the imperial doctors. Chi Xiaoyuan patted his hand reassuringly, and said, "This time the detoxification damage is too big, it doesn't matter." He became a doctor after a long illness. This was the second time he was poisoned, and he was very familiar with this situation. Huayuan was withdrawing his hand, bowed and said, "The emperor is right, your body has suffered a lot this time, and you are tired and angry, so." Huayuan said cautiously, "Your Majesty should calm down, and it is the best policy to take good care of him after the poison is completely eliminated." Qi Xiaoyuan said softly yes, looked at Xiaobao and said, "You go and invite the national teacher, father has some questions to ask him." Xiaobao thought he was going to ask about his fourth uncle and fourth aunt, so he hurried outside. After Qi Xiaoyuan waited for the others to leave, he glanced at Eunuch Wan, and Eunuch Wan hurriedly led the people to bow and retreat, leaving only Huayuan Zheng in the hall. Huayuan was standing on the side with his head down, and his heart couldn't help but raise his head. Qi Xiaoyuan adjusted his posture and asked, "How is the poison on Prince Rong?" Prince Rong exchanged half of the poisonous blood with His Majesty, but he has deep internal strength and good health. He started taking antidote after the poisonous blood merged, so there should be no serious problems. Qi Xiaoyuan stared at him for a while and asked, "Then why didn't Prince Rong come back to Beijing to see me?" Huayuan Zheng said with cold sweat on his forehead, "It is said that the princess is in danger, the prince may be worried about the princess." Qi Xiaoyuan snorted coldly. Huayuan Zheng didn't dare to say any more. The hall fell silent, only the breathing of the two could be heard. The cold sweat on Huayuan Zheng's forehead grew more and more, and finally he couldn't bear the psychological pressure, and said in a voice like mosquitoes and ants, "But Prince Rong's poison has not been fully detoxified, and he is tired of running around. I heard that he has used his internal strength again, and the expansion of the toxin has accelerated. It may also penetrate into the blood and bone marrow." Qi Xiaoyuan's eyes sank, and Huayuan was sneaking a glance at him, and said in cold sweat, "However, the national teacher has represcribed a prescription based on the pulse case reported back, and Prince Rong should be fine." Seeing that Qi Xiaoyuan's expression had not improved, Huayuan couldn't help but knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, even if Prince Rong's condition gets worse, it's not half as good as yours. Now your body is the most important thing." Qi Xiaoyuan was startled, and asked, "How long can I live?" Huayuan was speechless. "Speak, I forgive you for your innocence." Qi Xiaoyuan smiled and said, "It's a blessing to be able to wake up this time, what more can I ask for? But how many people in this world can face life and death calmly?" Huayuan Zheng closed his eyes, and replied, "Go back to the emperor, at least 3 to 5 years, at most 7 or 8 years, it just depends on whether you take good care of yourself." These poisons were too overbearing, and they came on suddenly. Qi Xiaoyuan's body couldn't bear it at all, and so many toxins stayed in his body for 4 days, and then they used tiger wolf medicine to suppress the toxins in his body, so his internal organs, the damage to the 6 internal organs is great. Humans live by internal organs. Anyway, with the abilities of him and his colleagues in the Imperial Hospital, the Emperor's injury can't be cured at all, unless he can find a famous doctor who is good at regulating internal organs. Qi Xiaoyuan murmured, "If you hurt Heiran, you can only win 3 to 5 years, so why not just die, at least save one?" "Your Majesty," Huayuan kowtowed and said, "Da Qi cannot do without you." Qi Xiaoyuan waved his hand and said, "You don't need to tell the prince and queen about this matter. You select 2 imperial physicians from the Imperial Hospital who are good at detoxifying and taking care of the body, and send them to Prince Rong, so that he doesn't have to rush back and heal his body first." Huayuan was going out with red eyes. He was an imperial physician in the previous dynasty. He was used to the calculations and strife between the royal family of the great Zhou dynasty. It was the first time he saw that there was true love in the royal family, so he was very sad. Huayuan was standing in front of the main hall and thinking for a while, thinking that the emperor just mentioned 3 to 5 years but not 7 or 8 years. Obviously he didn't want to take good care of his body, and the other party had ordered not to inform the prince and queen. Hua Yuan was you can only tell Prince Wrong about it. Anyway, the emperor didn't tell Prince Wrong, did he? If Prince Wrong persuaded him, the emperor would most likely listen. Hua Yuan thought about it, and immediately selected an imperial doctor, packed up a bunch of medicinal materials, and asked someone to send it to Prince Wrong. Yuan Hui walked slowly to the emperor's dormitory, and seeing him reading the memorial, she shook her head slightly and said, "Your Majesty, if you are so tired, I'm afraid it will affect your longevity." Qi Ziyuan dropped the booklet, looked up at him and asked, "Since you know how to count destiny, then I ask you, how many years can I live, and how many years can Prince Wrong live?" Yuan Hui smiled and said, "Your Majesty, although this poor monk can peep into the sky, he is not a god. I can't figure out the two problems you mentioned." He stood cross-legged across from Qi Ziyuan, and said compassionately, "Everything in the world is not fixed by the way of heaven, so the way of heaven is also changing. People's choices and actions can change the way of heaven, but what the poor monk can do is to calculate the general development of some things based on the evolution of celestial phenomena. And these will be shown in people's faces and palms. For example, when I saw Prince Wrong back then, I knew that he was destined to be rich and powerful, and he had a dragon's breath, but the dragon's breath was too shallow. I thought he was a potential dragon in the abyss, but when I looked at his palmistry then I realized that the fate is in his brother, not him." Yuan Hui said with a smile, "Back then, I worked hard to deduce the celestial phenomena, deduced that you will be able to calm the world when you are over 40, replace Dezhou, and see Princess Wrong afterwards. We know that the way of heaven is changing, and the celestial phenomena are no longer reliable, and it is just around the corner that you take. Does who to replace it? Prince Wrong is the variable between you and Prince Wrong," Yuan Hui said. "Prince Wrong is destined to have 2 wives and 4 concubines, 4 sons and 1 daughter, but you see, he only has 1 wife, 4 sons and 1 daughter. It's complete. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1300. Qi Ziyuan thought of all the differences in Aling. He knew her when Aling was 9 years old. Apart from her great strength and the fact that her mother came from the Shu family, there is really nothing special about this child, but she always knows something that shouldn't be her. Know the knowledge. It's not that Qi Ziyuan didn't doubt it, but he watched Aling grow up, and she and his younger brother had a deep affection as childhood sweethearts, so he could only pretend that these anomalies didn't exist. Qi Ziyuan didn't ask about Mu Yangling's origin. She saved her younger brother and saved him, and now she has 5 children with Heiran. She has made contributions to the country and the people, so what if she knows her origin? As long as you know that she is Mu Yangling and your brother's wife. Seeing this, Yuan Hui smiled, and said, "Your Majesty, this poor monk loves you, calm and generous, and broad-minded." Qi Ziyuan twitched the corner of his mouth and remained silent. "Mu Yangling is the beloved person of heaven. When I saw her, I thought she was a kind of person who resurrected from a dead body, but she is not. She is the heir conceived by Mu Shi and Shu Wanyang, but the soul is different from ordinary people. Forget it, it was also born in October." Yuan Hui knew what Qi Ziyuan was concerned about, so he pointed it out without hesitation. Qi Ziyuan breathed a sigh of relief. The poor monk said that people's choices and actions can change the way of heaven, so we need to deduce from time to time that Mu Yangling's accident was caused by the choices of Mu Shi and Shu Wanyang, Yuan Hui said with a smile. Shu Wanyang died young. She was supposed to be killed by bandits, but Mu Shi survived and the two became husband and wife. This was an accident, so Mu Yangling's birth was also an accident, and there are thousands of accidents in this world. The combination can make Tiandao change its original trajectory, but among these many accidents, there is always one that is the main one. First she planted corn, which made His Majesty's reputation grow, and then unintentionally contributed to Prince Rong's military training, which made him angry, took back the Hanshong mansion in advance, and accidentally killed the Dajin prince. If her birth was an accidental appearance in Tianhe, a small drop of water, then the things she influenced directly split a ditch by the Tianhe River, and as she influenced more, the ditch became wider and longer, and in the end, the way of heaven would naturally change. Track. Qi Xiaoyuan understood that Xu Wanyang should have been killed by bandits in the year she fled south with her family, but Mu Shi, who happened to be there, appeared to save her, and the Xu family was unwilling to find another daughter, so the two people get married. This accident directly caused the birth of Mu Yangling. Although she was born in October of the two people's pregnancy, her soul is different from ordinary people. If she is just a daughter of Orion, then this accident is nothing more than an accident in the sea. A drop of water will not make any waves. However, his younger brother and cousin ran away from home and went to Northland to join him, and then he was accidentally rescued by her in the mountains. He is the son of destiny. Without Mu Yangling, he would have to wait until he was over 40 to become emperor, and she met the emperor and the people around him by accident, and the accident expanded. What's more, Mu Shi's family is still classified as a military household, and they live under the hands of their younger brother. It's hard not to get along with each other. Seeing that he had figured it out, Yuan Hui immediately said with a smile, "It is because of her that Daki established the country 20 years ahead of schedule, and what she has done has already affected every single person in Daki and the situation of the world. Daki's national destiny is linked together. If she dies unexpectedly, then these influences will gradually weaken, and Daki's national destiny will be slowly reversed by heaven, and you, Prince Rong, you direct beneficiaries will naturally have to pay the corresponding amount, the price. Even if she is the person whom Tiandao loves, Tiandao will not let her be so blessed, so there are spring thunders in Nangxian County, but she is lucky, the spring thunder did not hit her head, and the natural disaster did not kill her. The good deeds my concubine has done over the years and the accumulated merits saved her from death, so doing good deeds is still very useful," Yuan Hui said meaningfully. Only then did Qi Xiaoyuan want to go to what Mu Yangling had done these years, the grains provided by Fengshao grain store, and the stabilization of prices saved many people, and the cattle sent out from the cattle farm directly added 2 strong laborers to each household, not to mention other sporadic things. Heiran often said that Aling was soft-hearted, and her heart was indeed soft. Qi Xiaoyuan's heart moved, and he asked, could it be that she is a fairy from the sky who went down to the earth to survive the calamity? Yuan Hui twitched the corners of her mouth. Fairy. It was obviously a soul from another world. Yuan Hui recalled the scene when she first met her. Her soul was extremely powerful. It was obvious that she had lived an extra life. However, there was a faint golden light in her soul, which indicated that she had done great deeds in her previous life. Such a good person, or a person who has contributed to the country and the people, such a person is especially loved by Tiandao, so he is always willing to make an exception. Yuan Hui didn't want to lie, so she just shook her head and said, she is a person with golden merit and virtue in her soul. That's a good guy. After hearing what he said, Qi Xiaoyuan felt much better. Since Aling is loved by Tiandao, in order not to make her sad, Tiandao should be more tolerant to Heiran. Hinder. After Qi Xiaoyuan felt at peace, he began to detoxify while instructing Xiaobao to deal with the government affairs. He only has 3 to 5 years, and Xiaobao is only 15 years old, so he should hurry up and train him. Qi Xiaoyuan's time is tight, and he wished to be a 3-petal flower every day, but Qi Heiran, who was also poisoned, asked someone to spread a piece of animal skin on a rock, and then lay on it to bask in the sun. Mu Yangling held a book and taught the 2 children to read the 3-character classic. The guards cut down trees on the hill next door, and managed to make 2 small desks for the 2 young masters. Seeing that the master's family took the hill as their home, The chief guard immediately wrinkled his face in bitterness, and the guards asked puzzledly, "Boss, don't the prince and princess live happily? It's better than being sad every day. Let them worry about it." The chief guard glared at them and said, "What do you know? I'm afraid that the prince and concubine will not leave in the end." "No way," the guards were terrified. "I don't care what you want on this mountain, why would the prince want to stay here?" The chief guard said sadly, "That was for us. Look, do you want anything on this mountain now? There are pots, firewood, rice, oil, salt, sauce, vinegar and tea, brushes, ink, paper and inkstones, piano, chess, calligraphy and painting are also quite a lot. Clothes, fabrics and shoes are all available. If there is something missing, we will go out to buy it 3 times a day. Do you think the prince and princess are still in a hurry to go out now?" The guards were terrified. Yes, ever since the son of the Sun Fei sent a letter saying that the emperor woke up after taking the rock lotus, he has been slowly detoxifying. Not only the princess, but also the prince seems to have relaxed all of a sudden, except for meditation and martial arts every day, just basking in the sun, watching the 2 little masters study, arguing with the princess from time to time, living a very comfortable life, and even not mentioning leaving at all, instead making them go around. The guards turned their heads to look at the low thatched huts halfway up the mountain, and thought to themselves without tears, "Are they going to live here for a long time?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1301. Chi Heiran basked in the sun on the rock with his legs crossed, and sighed contentedly, "It's not bad if we live like this all the time." Chi Heiran turned his head and said to Mu Yangling, "Why don't we bring the tiger head and the little lion over? Let's hire another gentleman for them. How many years will we stay here? Of course I have no objection if you can let go of the affairs of the capital." They hadn't seen their 3 sons for more than 4 months, and she was thinking too hard. Chi Heiran was thinking about the tiger head and the little lion. At this time, the tiger head and the little lion had arrived at the intersection with the 2 imperial doctors and guards. Looking at the road that was badly damaged, the 2 looked at each other, jumped up decisively, and shouted, "Let's take the first step, you can slowly find a way in." The 2 imperial doctors watched the 2 young masters leave, and could only grab a guard and said, "We want to see the prince. How can we see the prince if we don't see him? Besides, the Huayuan is writing a letter to the prince." "Letter?" The guard thought for a while and said, "Wait 2 more days and the road will be almost dry. Then we will pick up the prince and concubine. As for the letter, you might as well give it to us to present to the prince." The imperial doctor poked the soft soil with his foot, and could only take out the letter and handed it to him, "But you still have to find a way to send the prince out as soon as possible, or send us in. The poison on the prince's body is detoxified. No matter how we have to feel the pulse in person, the body can be recuperated in time." The guards responded repeatedly, but turned around but left the 2 imperial doctors behind and jumped inside. The imperial physicians could only take their medicine boys and servants to look inside eagerly. Chi Heiran dangled to look at the handwriting written by his youngest son after he had had enough exposure to the sun. After reading it for a while, he said in distaste, "This handwriting is too ugly. Your father and I wrote it much better than this when I was young." The little leopard immediately put the brush into his father's hand, hugged his legs and climbed up, shouting, "Daddy, teach me." Bezu made a face at her elder brother and said, "You are so stupid, mother has been teaching you for a long time." "I'm not stupid. I can master the kung fu that my father taught me as soon as I practice it." "You are stupid if you still don't understand the mind." Bezu's eyes turned red, she immediately dropped the brush and threw herself into her father's arms, crying and asked, "Daddy, am I your and mother's child? Why can't I practice internal strength? Chi Heiran is free these 2 days, and Little Leopard and Bezu are both 4 years old again, ready to be enlightened and practice martial arts, so they started to teach them to meditate and practice internal strength. The little leopard only found the feeling after sitting for a long time, and even found the sense of breath after a day and a half, but Bezu didn't feel it at all. When crossing his legs, he either fell to one side or fell asleep directly, so he was ridiculed by the little leopard. Chi Heiran immediately hugged his precious daughter and coaxed, "You were carved out of the same mold as Daddy, whose daughter is not Daddy's daughter." Mu Yangling was trying the soup, and when he heard this, he spit out the soup from his mouth, and the surrounding guards turned their heads to hold back their laughter. "If Bezu is carved out of the same mold as you, how will she marry in the future?" Mu Yangling pulled her daughter into his arms and said to her, "Don't listen to your father talking nonsense, you look like your grandmother, and, practicing martial arts, pay attention to talent. If you are not good at this aspect, it does not mean that you are also inferior to your brother in other aspects." He went to teach Xiao Beizai again, "You are not allowed to call your sister stupid because of martial arts." The little leopard shouted unconvinced, "It was my sister who said I was stupid first, and only allowed the state officials to set fires and not allow the people to light lamps. I am so wronged." Chi Heiran couldn't help but patted his son on the head. "What are you yelling about? It's your mother who taught you badly. You really use all kinds of words indiscriminately." Chi Heiran turned to comfort his daughter and said, "Don't cry, you are slow in martial arts because you inherited it from your mother. Think about your mother, she has practiced kung fu for 20 years and is still a three-legged cat." Mu Yangling stared at him. Chi Heiran continued, "But who dares to bully your mother? Although she is not good at martial arts, ordinary people are no match for her." "Why?" Bezu looked at his father with bright eyes. Chi Heiran touched her head and smiled, "One is because your mother is strong, and the other is because your mother's martial arts are good. Although her internal strength is not good, she has a unique style of every move, and she can defeat the enemy. Kaiju, not to mention ordinary people, even your father and me, I can't take her down even if I try my best." Mu Yangling thought he would say that she couldn't beat her, but she actually said that she could only do 100 moves, and couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Chi Heiran continued to rub his daughter's head and said, "The most important thing is, why do you, a princess, have to practice martial arts? You have guards and maids with strong martial arts by your side, and you don't have to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, so there is no need to learn these things." Chi Heiran said proudly, "Didn't Daddy make great achievements just to let you live as you wish?" Bezu was stunned for a moment, then looked back at her mother, then at her elder brother, and said, "But my elder brothers all learn." "That's because they are boys, and they will make contributions to protect their country in the future. But my mother said that men and women are equal in our family, and I will also make contributions in the future to protect my family and country." Chi Heiran said with a stern face, "Who said that men and women are equal in our family?" He said seriously, "You are the only girl in our family, and your brothers have to protect you. You are the first in everything. Brothers, if anyone bullies you in the future, tell them back and let them help you fight to vent your anger." Mu Yangling hurriedly pushed Chi Heiran away, and said to the two children, "Okay, don't be silly, have you finished the homework assigned to you today? After finishing it, Mother will take you to play. If you don't finish it, you are not allowed to go out today." The two children ran back to do their homework immediately after hearing the words. As for the topic of who is stupid and who is smart, let's discuss it later. After the child left, Mu Yangling gave him a light hammer and said, "How can you teach the child the worst? What's wrong with teaching them brothers and sisters to love each other? Aren't you afraid of spoiling Bezu? Let me tell you, you are not allowed to spoil children like this." Chi Heiran pouted and said, "Master Bezu has a good temper and a kind heart, no matter how much I spoil her, she won't turn bad." Chi Heiran was about to grab his wife to seriously discuss this issue, when he raised his eyes and saw a small black spot jumping up from a distance. Although he didn't see the person clearly, he was very familiar with the method of lightness kung fu, and all his family used this lightness kung fu. He couldn't help but rubbed his eyes, and took 2 steps forward to look. The 2 small black spots in front of him became more and more obvious, and he quickly saw the figure clearly. How did the boy come here? Mu Yangling followed his gaze, was also taken aback, and asked hesitantly, is this the tiger head and the little lion? Who else is not them? The 2 figures became clearer and clearer, and they soon reached the foot of the mountain. The 2 quickly roared and ran up the mountain quickly. Little Leopard and Beza heard the shout, and hurried over to look, saw the 2 older brothers flying up after a few vertical leaps, immediately clapped their little hands happily and shouted, "Second brother, third brother. The reborn wife is farming." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1302. The tiger head and the little lion also flew towards the younger siblings, picked them up, and laughed loudly after hugging each other. Chi Heiran looked at them, and then at the guards behind them, thinking that he had just received Xiao Xiong's flying pigeon letter last night, which clearly stated that these 2 boys went to the farm to inspect the farmland. Why did the 2 of them run to the farm today? Here. Chi Heiran glared at them. Hutu and the little lion cuddled with their siblings for a while, and then happily came over to greet their parents. "Daddy, it's great that you're fine, we were shocked when we knew you were poisoned." Going to snuggle up with Mu Yangling again, "Mother, we were almost scared to death after you disappeared." Chi Heiran glared at them and said, "Don't change the subject, did you sneak here?" The tiger head and the little lion nodded triumphantly. "That's right, people in the capital may not know that we ran away from home." Chi Heiran glared at them, turned around to look for something to beat them up, and now even Mu Yangling didn't protect them. Chi Heiran picked up a branch and went to beat them. The 2 children shouted unconvinced while running, "They are only allowed to hide it from us, but we are not allowed to hide it from them." The tiger head and the little lion couldn't help their eyes turning red when they said this, and shouted, "We've grown up, why should we keep everything from us?" The little lion's eyes just turned red, but the tiger's head couldn't help crying, and shouting, "Don't tell us that Uncle Huang is poisoned, and don't tell us, Daddy, that you exchanged blood with Uncle Huang, even mother, younger siblings, etc. They disappeared without telling us, we have grown up, why don't you tell us?" The little lion raised his hand to wipe away his tears, and the tiger head was already crying, "If Brother Xiaoan hadn't helped us, we might still be foolishly staying in the palace until now." The little lion raised his hand stupidly, and couldn't help but secretly stare at the tiger's head, revealing that he was sunken. Hutu was wiping away his tears, and didn't see the little lion's wink, but continued to be wronged and said, "You all lie to us, we will also lie to you once, so that you can know what it feels like to be lied to." Chi Heiran opened his mouth, not knowing how to teach his 2 wronged sons a lesson, so he could only say with a straight face, "I'm sweating all over, hurry up and take a bath." It's an acknowledgement of them. Mu Yangling grabbed the 2 children and asked, "Xiaoan helped you run away from home, so Uncle Fan knows?" Whose head was startled, and he opened his mouth wide and asked, "Mother, how do you know that Brother Xiaoan helped us run away from home?" Mu Yangling. Chi Heiran beat him up furiously and said, "You said it yourself, brat, how many times have I told you that you have to use your brain when you speak, otherwise don't open your mouth." Hutu ran away with his head in his arms, and shouted, "Uncle Fan said that I resemble you in this way, so there is no need to change it." Chi Heiran was choked upright. Mu Yangling couldn't help but burst out laughing, and asked the 2 children to take a bath. She took Chi Heiran's hand and said, "Okay, Zijin definitely doesn't know about this matter, you should write to him quickly and ask him to be gentle with Xiaoan, so as not to scare the child." Chi Heiran hummed and went to write a letter to Fan Zijin. The guard hurriedly followed and handed Hua Yuanzhen's letter to him. Qi Heiran opened it indifferently, and his face gradually became serious. Mu Yangling polished the ink for him, and asked curiously when he saw this, "What's wrong?" Qi Heiran handed the letter to her with a serious face, and said, "Even if the elder brother is detoxified, his body will suffer a lot. He needs to use strange medicine and famous doctors, but Hua Yuan is saying that elder brother doesn't really want to treat it." Mu Yangling asked anxiously, "Then what should I do?" Qi Heiran pondered. The joy of the reunion was suddenly shattered by this news. He was not in a good mood until he went to bed at night. Qi Heiran turned over again, couldn't help hugging Mu Yangling and said, "Aling, let's not go back to the capital, okay?" Lying in his arms, Mu Yangling said clearly, "Do you want to help elder brother find a famous doctor and medicine?" Qi Heiran nodded, and said, "Anyway, there is nothing to do when we go back to Beijing, and the little bear has grown up, so let's take the tiger head and the little lion with us. Shall we go together as a family?" "But brother, if you don't want to see a doctor, it's useless even if you find a famous doctor and medicine." "Don't worry," Qi Heiran said almost inaudibly, "I will find a way to make him accept." Qi Heiran's solution was very simple. He asked the guards to find a way to bring the two imperial physicians in. The imperial physicians had already lost their lives when they were carried up the mountain, because it was the first time for the guards to lift such a heavy object, so they fell several times on the road, and every time they fell, they got stuck in the mud. The guards had martial arts body protection, most of them were skin trauma, but the imperial physicians were almost scared to death, and fell to the ground when they climbed halfway up the mountain. They thought that carrying them in such a hurry was because something happened to the prince, and they had to climb to the prince's place even if they couldn't stand up halfway up the mountain. Qi Heiran was sitting in a thatched hut with a sword in his hand, and when he saw two imperial physicians being helped in, he raised his eyelids, his eyes flashed coldly, and he drew out his sword and slashed across their necks. This sword was used to fight with Qi Heiran and kill the enemy, so the bloody smell on it should not be too heavy. The two imperial physicians were frightened, and knelt down on the ground, tremblingly said, my lord, no, I don't know what I did wrong." Qi Heiran sneered and said, "You didn't do anything wrong, it's just that this king needs your cooperation in something. It's best if you obey. If you don't, then the sword in this king's hand." Qi Heiran snorted coldly. The two imperial physicians were fighting with each other, and asked fearfully, "I don't know what's going on. The poison in this king is not shallow." When he didn't detoxify, he used his internal strength and failed to suppress the poison, so his body suffered a lot. In addition to working day and night, he even vomited several mouthfuls of blood. Now there is only breath in and no breath out. It's... The two imperial physicians silently looked at Qi Heiran, who was holding a sword in his hand, and said nothing. Qi Heiran continued, "Even if you can cure this king's poison, it will be difficult to use your internal strength again, and your life expectancy is only 3 to 5 years. If you want to continue your life, you have to seek out famous doctors and strange medicines for conditioning." The two imperial physicians considered it carefully and said, "So what does the Lord mean?" "You can write a secret book to the emperor according to this meaning. Remember, this king does not want to tell the emperor about this matter, so he conceals it in every possible way. Although you are in danger of this king, you are more worried about his body, so you secretly write it. Report to the emperor." The two imperial physicians almost wanted to vomit blood. Normally, given the emperor's favor for the prince, even if the prince wanted to claim credit, he wouldn't use such a method, would he? Qi Heiran continued, "If you do well, I will keep you by my side to serve you. Don't worry, high officials and high salaries cannot do without you." The two imperial doctors looked at the sword in his hand with a cold light. What else could they do except nod?